Yeah.
Okay, we're starting now.
Howdy, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our CERD coffee chat. Today, we are focusing on the topic of finding external funding for our faculty members in our College of Education and Human Development. I am Jeff Liu, the Associate Dean for Research for our college. And I want to start off by introducing our panelists who are joining us. So we're very thankful for all of our panelists who will share their insights about helping our PIs find external sources of funding for their programs of research. So if I can have each guest panelist briefly introduce yourselves, tell us which department or unit you're with, and also what kind of external funding mechanisms you are familiar with working with. So I'm going to start off with Noemi Mendoza Diaz. Oh, your microphone, please, Naomi.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I just started talking a few minutes ago, but this is my third year in the college, but it's actually my seventh year in the university. So I started in the College of Engineering in 2014. So all the external funding that I've had so far, it's been NSF in the university. While I was working in a local school district, in a charter school, I also secured some funds for other initiatives, state initiatives. So I've been around for a while. So although I'm not a a tenure professor, I'm on tenure track still. I've learned a few things in the field that I will be happy to share.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Naomi.
Thank you.
Next, if I can have Sandra Acosta introduce herself, please.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Sandra Acosta. I'm with the Educational Psychology Department and the Bilingual Education ESL Division. Some of the areas that I've looked at have, and I've been, I guess, fairly, depending on how you describe successful with seed grants to look for pilot data. But the places that I look are certainly the Department of Education, the OELA office, which really has to do with English language acquisition. So there are usually one or two calls, RFP calls per year. And then one of the things that I'm looking at right now as an extension of a catapult is the Kellogg Foundation. Seed grants that I've found have not only at Texas A&M, but also in the American Psychological Association. So those have been areas that I've looked at, sometimes, and then teaching grants. I'm not clinical, but certainly have partnered with other clinical. And so that's been, and I'm on Aggie term. So those have been the areas that I've looked at.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. Karen Rambo-Hernandez.
Certainly. I am also fairly new to Texas A&M. I arrived here in 2019. I was previously at West Virginia University and at Colorado State University, and I am an associate professor in TLAC. And I have a joint courtesy appointment over in EPSY in research, measurement, and statistics. And my funding, I'd say over half of it has come from NSF. Probably a little more than half. I've had a series of successful grants there. I also have funding from the U.S. Department of Education. I have had funding from states where the U.S. gives the state money and then the state gives money out. And so I've done that. I've also had funding from AERA, the American Educational Research Association. My PhD dissertation was funded by the American Psychological Foundation. And then I've also had a little bit of experience with some other foundations like the Honda Foundation. So kind of all over the place.
Great, thank you,
I'm
Chair.
not picky. I'll take anybody's
No,
money.
it's great that you can share, your information from a diverse set of mechanisms with us today. Jim Izat, please.
Hi, everyone. I know almost everyone here. My name is Jim Izat. I work in research development. I work with faculty for, I guess, going on 11 years now. I spent the first 9 of those years working in the Division of Research in the Research Development Services Office. I've spent almost the last 2 in the Health and Kinesiology Department, which is just the best place to work I have ever worked. An amazing, dynamic faculty that are having all kinds of work for me to do, and I'm super busy, and I've seen so many folks be successful. It's just very exciting to do. Because of working, I guess, for the Division of Research, I've worked with, NSF, NIH, USDA, the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, several different foundations, some state agencies, just, whatever folks needed my assistance with, I've worked with a lot of the different funders. So, and I've spent, as I said to Dr. Mendoza a while ago, I have worked, I've sponsored a NSF career writing group for faculty for 7 years. And we were very fortunate to have some outstanding new faculty in that group year after year, and had about 24 folks that were successful with the NSF career. So I'm very happy to be here. If I can answer any questions, I'm happy to do that.
Great, thank you, Jim. And Jim mentioned about Division of Research. We are excited to have Shelly Martin from the Division of Research. Shelly?
Got to unmute. I'm Shelly from the Division of Research, and my title's a little weird for this, but I'm an executive assistant for Dr. Acosta. But part of my duties before I became that is I managed limited submission process for A&M, and that includes the agencies. So I've been doing that since 2012. So I was program coordinator for that before. So I kept it. You get a promotion and then you keep your old stuff. So what I do is I identify limited submission opportunities, and that's probably what you're most interested in, is how do I identify opportunities. But then I also announce them, and I administer the review and selection process. There's not a whole lot of limited submissions for the College of Education, but when there are humanities type social and behavioral sciences, then you'll see me during that. So I'm happy to help answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Shelly. Yeah, later on you can please share the general process of how that goes with our faculty. That would be very helpful.
Okay.
So I'll have Julie Svetlik introduce herself, and then she'll give a brief presentation as well. Julie?
Hello, I'm Julie Svetlik. I'm the new Senior Research Development Officer here at the college. And before I came here, I worked for 11 years at Texas A&M AgriLife Research in a similar role. And what I did there, I worked with many agencies such as NSF, USDA, obviously, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, a lot of science-y stuff. So it was very interesting. And it's very exciting to me to be in this college now, because I will probably understand your proposals a lot better than I did the other ones. So I'm here to help faculty find funding, just brainstorm research plans, anything dealing with pre-award, I'm here for. Oh, and I have a presentation. Oh, let's find it here. Okay, can you all see a slide?
Yes.
Okay, got several things on my computer, so. All right, so this will be very short, I hope. I tend to get going and rolling and just start talking. So I'll try to keep this as short as possible. Just going to go over my audience for this presentation is more of the early career faculty. So if this is a little, yeah, we're just trying to get everybody on the same page here. So we'll talk about first just general types of sponsors, where to search for opportunities, the importance of relationships, and then how I can help. And then we'll go into our Q&A. So there are several types of sponsors. We've got the basic research agencies, the NIH, NSF. They tend to have stable research agendas and extremely broad goals. They usually accept unsolicited proposals, and their agenda doesn't really change very much from year to year. So they're pretty solid and stable in terms of what they'll fund. On the other hand, we have mission agencies, which you see some examples up there: Department of Ed, USDA, Department of Energy. Their missions are set by Congress, and they tend to change either from year to year or from administration to administration. So those are the types of solicitations that come out, and you really don't have much warning on when what those solicitations are going to be about. You just see them pop up, and then you have a month or two to throw out a proposal. And those are usually based on something Congress has done. So they're strongly affected by changes in administration. And state agencies, I guess you could probably consider those more like a mission agency, because those are also affected by political changes. And then we also have foundations. I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in a minute. And also we have industry sponsored research and professional organizations. It sounds like a couple of you are using the American Psychological Association. I know they're big here in the college. So those are some other sponsors. And where to search. Thankfully, in the days of the internet, this is so much easier. So we can just go to grants.gov, set up a search, have them send us email alerts every week or every day or whatever. And it's easy to get inundated with grant opportunities, but the grants.gov gives you all the federal opportunities, and it's basically all the federal agencies, and you can go in and set up an email alert to send you from specific agencies, and that's really easy to do. Also, it's good to go into each funding agency. If you're interested in those agencies, go into their specific website and sign up for their email alerts for funding opportunities. That's what I do. And so it tends to give you a little bit more information on where they're going and what they're doing. There are aggregators. For example, with our TAMU libraries, we have Pivot. And so they collect funding opportunities from all different sources, and then we'll spit it back to you. And you can also set up a search through Pivot that will just send you alerts every so often. And Pivot is really good. There's also a whole list of external funding sites on our Division of Research website. So I sent the link there too, and we could probably post these slides somewhere, right, Jeff? Okay, because we do have a link in there. And then there's also, if you're interested in foundations, there's a service called Candid. It used to be called the Foundation Center. They've changed their name. They have a few links on how to search for foundation grants. Some are subscription services, but I think they're probably worth it if you're really interested in the foundations. Relationships, I think, are the most important way of trying to find out where to find funding, where to seek. I think colleagues are probably your number one resource. You would talk to colleagues who are experienced, who have been funded already. Also talk to colleagues who've served as reviewers for agencies, programs. Also try to volunteer and serve as a reviewer yourself. That's a really good way to learn about an agency's direction and their funding priorities. Talk talk to your colleagues, find out where they are seeking funding, and then try to get involved in that community. And that way you get a lot more information, a lot more news, and learn a little bit more about how to go after funding with that agency. Also, conferences and workshops are really, really informative. Those are the places where you find out where that agency is planning to go in terms of their funding, future funding. They usually announce new programs at these workshops that you don't see in the online news necessarily. So those are really, really useful. So if you have a chance to go to conferences, go to all that you can and soak all that up. Those are also good places to meet the program directors. And that is another great resource on finding funding and learning if your research areas fit the agency's mission. Get to know the individuals that work in that agency or the foundation, develop a good relationship with them, and that will pay you back in spades. Also befriend your senior research development officer. I'm here for you. Would love to meet with you one-on-one, talk about what you're doing, what you're interested in, where you'd like to find funding. And I'm a great resource right here in the college for you. So a little bit of what I do, I track sponsor priorities. I watch the news, watch all the congressional updates, find out where the funding is going and what priorities that they're chasing. And then, so I try to do a little bit of that intelligence for you. However, you're the boots on the ground, and you can also feed me intelligence. So it's a two-way street. I also help find funding sources for you. I send out weekly emails. If you are not getting those emails, let me know and I'll add you to the list. And I can also perform tailored funding searches. If you send me a research idea or just a research area, ask me to look in certain places or anywhere, I will help you find some funding opportunities. And anything pre-award related, come talk to me. I'm happy to set up a Zoom meeting. We'll just have a little conversation, and that'll give me a better idea of what you're doing. And when I come across a funding opportunity, maybe your name will pop up in my brain and I can send it directly to you. And so also I can help you connect with collaborators. Those collaborators will end up being part of your network and also feeding you funding opportunities for other opportunities. Okay, a little bit about foundations. I think a registrant had a question about foundations. They can be large or small, and large versus small, they're very different. They tend to have really focused priorities, and those can change over time. So do your homework, and I would say stay up to date on what they're doing. Visit their websites often, talk to their program managers as much as you can, check in periodically. What have they funded in the past? What did they fund last year? And that's a good idea of getting an idea of where you might be going in terms of your success with them. There's a foundation that on Candid, they have a website where you can find all kinds of organizations and what they fund. So I think that's a good resource if you can use that. Just a couple of examples. These are popular in the college, and those of you that are on our meeting today, I think you're probably familiar with them too. We've got some state level foundations, some national foundations, and also field specific foundation from the APA. But I also have links for all of these if you're interested. Just find the slides. And that is the conclusion of my little overview. And I'm hoping that will open that up to some questions by our audience.
So Julie, I'd like to start off with a question about IDCs or indirect cost rates. And what are some differences potentially for funding mechanisms that are federal versus foundation? Is that something a PI should consider, and why?
Well, I have my own perspective on those, and it's probably different from a faculty's perspective. But so as you all know, IDCs fund, they keep the lights on, and they keep, this office running. So IDCs are important. That unfortunately, IDCs do, take away a little bit of the direct cost that you're able to use for the research, but it also makes sure that we stay functioning as a college. So the basic science agencies, so NIH, NSF, they tend to allow full IDC rate, which I always forget, but it's around 51, 52 percent. And so that's good for us. But the foundations often restrict the amount of IDC that's charged. So they can either not allow IDC to be charged, or they restrict it to just some smaller percentage.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, you termed it like keep the lights on. So, a lot of our faculty who have a need for office space for themselves, for the GAs or RAs, any lab space, so that space in itself, as well as the utilities and all of that good stuff, needs to come from somewhere. And if you don't have that included in your direct cost, then that's a cost that our department, college, or university need to find somewhere else to draw from, right? So that is something our institution is looking at. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, some projects are relatively low cost. You may not need a lot of space for yourself or for your research team. So that might be a little bit different, but that is one reason why our institution is very careful about our IDC rates for external mechanisms. I also want to ask Shelly to talk a little bit about, to share, some of our faculty may not even be aware of or familiar with what limited submissions opportunities are. So if you can tell us what that is and what is the general process for applying for those. Your microphone, please, Shelly. Thank you.
Yeah, so when we talk about limited submissions, we mean those opportunities that are institutionally limited. So we may be allowed to submit one for the whole university, or 3, or whatever the number is, but we're strictly talking about institutionally limited. There's other kinds of limitations that might be put on, but we don't deal with that in my office. Yeah, so the process is kind of I guess, I identify opportunities, and one thing Julie had on her presentation was pivot, and pivot is for me, because their search function is so good, and they even have a limited submission search as part of the search. So I can get all of the limit, and they're so good about everything. I mean, it's not even just US, it's all over the world. So it's very rare that I come across an opportunity that's not on Pivot. So it's probably pretty much my one-stop shop now. And if you aren't familiar with Pivot, you should be get familiar. And everyone at the university is eligible to get on. You can just go to the A&M's website and search for Pivot, and you can get on with your UIN, your credentials. that's available to everyone. After that, I announced them, and I have what's fairly new, it's about a year old, a newsletter that goes out every Friday that has the limited submission announcements on it. And the new ones are at the top. And but that if you are interested in subscribing to that, if you didn't know about that, you can just send me an email and I'll send you the link. It's kind of a long link. So we also have other, the Division of Research has a couple of other newsletters that go out weekly about research. Research Development Services just came out with, I think it's a monthly newsletter, but that's a one-stop where you can subscribe to everything or nothing, or unsubscribe. So if you need that link, just drop me a line. And then so that's pretty much how we announce them now. We have a website, of course, that they're all listed on. And then thirdly, I administered the internal review and the selection process. So if we try to have a reviewer from each college that's represented in the pool of applicants. And then once that the internal review is done, then I would also liaise with the SRS so that they know who gets the go ahead for that opportunity, so that they don't have, they'll know. And so that's pretty much the limited submission process.
No, that's very helpful, especially for our faculty who may not be familiar with what that is and what the process is. Shelly, that I've helped with the review process myself. The system is set up really well organized, really clear. So if anyone has questions, contact Shelly or go on their website. It's very clearly described, the procedure. But I do imagine for faculty who don't really know what even that is, it may seem a little confusing at first.
It is a lot more of the organizations and it's a lot more STEM focused rather than social behavioral for limited submissions. But occasionally there are those social behavioral limited submissions. So I'll, just so you'll be aware of it, you can just scan down and see if anything interests you, and then, go on. So I would encourage you to sign up for the newsletters.
And one last thing, while this is not necessarily an external mechanism, it definitely can lead to an external mechanism. So I do want to quickly have you talk about the X grants that you're helping coordinate with Acosta's and the Division of Research, and what that is and how that may help our A&M folks then move on to external funding mechanism.
Right. So X grants, if you're not familiar with X grants, it's an internal program, and I just got off of a Zoom, in fact, for the one page. It starts with one pagers, and we actually had 225 one pagers this round, and so those, a lot of them are to get pilot data to go on to apply for external funding. I've lost my train of thought.
Fine. And I also helped with some of those reviews. It was fresh on my mind. I know the X grants, they have small projects and large projects, and the large ones can go up to a couple $1 million in terms of total budget.
Right.
And small ones about $1 million or so.
Yes, yes. And they also, I will say that this year they're really wanting to encourage social behavioral projects, and they're looking really closely to make sure that it's kind of a fair, that the initial review panel, it has one social behavioral scientist, one medical, and then one STEM, medical or life science, and then one STEM reviewer. So they're trying to encourage the social behavioral. So it looks like this year we're going to have some more. That may be why we have such a, I think last year we had 140 something. This year we had 225. So hopefully the social behavioral will be more prominent this year. So we'll stay tuned.
No, we're excited that there is an emphasis this year for that competition on the social behavioral sciences, which is really important for our college. So I'm glad to see that happening. So I'm going to open up the discussion to all of our guest panelists to address. So we had a question submitted. Someone asked about how they go about seeking external funding for research focused on diversity and equity issues. So anyone on the panel, please feel free to chime in with advice or tips, especially if you have yourself done work in that area in terms of having research connect to diversity and equity issues.
So far to date, I've received, these are seed grants, but from APA has a diversity grant that they give, and we were able to get that. And then also from the diversity department here at Texas A&M. Now, I will say that sometimes these start off at $10,000, and it's not uncommon for them to be halved. So you have to, when you present these, that might be something to keep in mind.
Naomi, please.
Yes, I'm glad this question was asked. Like Sandra was saying, I got one of my recent grants was from the Office of Diversity here. So the way that I would go about it is, and it depends on the topic, of course. But since my research is focused on engineering education, the next step is going to be the bridge program, or the because the EEC, the organization at NSF that I usually submit and I get my grants from, the engineering centers, they do have a specialist on diversity and broadening participation. So that's kind of the path that I, and it's again, it's unique to the specific of the interest on equity and diversity. And mine is in engineering education, but I'm sure there are 4 other more specific topics. There are other routes that could lead to that. So, if I can take the advantage of the time to talk about this, like Sandra was saying, I would start with something small. My 2 largest grants have been presented with preliminary results of things that I have already initiated and preliminary data that I have already collected. So by the time that I present to an external agency, NSF, etc., I'm showing that I'm already working on this. I'm already engaged on this. So once I said in one panel that I was invited by NSF, what would be the most good advice that you would provide to any new person? And I said something that is probably going to shock some, but I said, honestly, I think my best advice is to tell the agency you're asking, hey guys, I'm going to do this whether you fund me or not. So I'm so passionate about this. I'm so into this that if you don't fund me, I'm just gonna find a way of doing it. So it's a little shocking that you don't have to say it, of course, but if you have that feeling, I think that's to me the most valuable advice that I could provide.
Thank you, Naomi. That's really refreshing to hear your approach to convey your passion for your work, to tell the reviewers that if you don't fund this, I'm still gonna do it. That's really different and a really refreshing approach that I have not thought about. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Naomi, earlier on you had a question and about NSF career. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more so we can discuss it?
Absolutely, and something I just forgot to tell the person who asked about the diversity. I'm more than happy to share my proposal, the one that got awarded by the diversity office. So I find that in my little network, because I think that's also very important to cultivate your network. We share proposals and we share ideas, and we see each other at review panels. And to me, that has been also very, very important.
Right.
The question I had earlier.
Sorry, before we move, I saw Karen want to share some advice and comments about this question.
I just wanted to also kind of tag on to the diversity question because, and it dovetails nicely with what Dr. Mendoza mentioned, and that is partnering with a discipline. So I also have funding around diversity, equity, inclusion with engineering faculty who are interested in addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion within their coursework. And so our most recent grant, it took us, our first grant was a smaller $200,000 grant, and now we have a $2 million grant to do this work at multiple campuses. So I think it comes in making connections and partnerships with other colleges and other departments whenever you're doing that work. I think that's where the money lies, for lack of a better term. Like it's those interdisciplinary connections that help you get that work, in my experience at least.
Great, thank you. And I see Jim nodding. Jim, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think Dr. Rambo-Hernandez was actually reading my mind, because I've worked on some collaborative proposals where an equity researcher was brought into a collaboration to work on that aspect of a larger grant that had an equity kind of an aspect to it, for lack of a better word. And that person was responsible for that part of the work that dealt with the equity, but it was part of generously being a larger effort in a different discipline. Than equity as a kind of a pure research pursuit. So I was thinking the same things, and I was like, oh, if nobody says it, I'm going to say it. But Dr. Rambo-Hernandez got to it before I did, so it's very, very true of my experience as well.
If I can just chime in for just a second, we were talking about X grants, and they are definitely encouraged to be multidisciplinary and bringing in a STEM person, bringing in a social behavioral scientist to do. Now you can't just be in there just to have your name in there, but you know, because the reviewers will catch that. But truly multidisciplinary is very encouraged in the X grants.
Thank you for mentioning that, Shelly. I was thinking the same thing since we mentioned X grants, because that's what the X grants are all about, right? Bringing together multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary research. And with this competition this year, really emphasizing and bringing in those social, behavioral, and educational researchers to collaborate with the other disciplines is really important.
And I should mention this also, that you may be thinking, well, I missed the boat because it's already started, but we're just on the one-pager stage. And at each stage, there's a the next stage is preliminary proposal, and then there's a final stage. PIs can add collaborators at each stage. So if you go on X grant website, I believe they'll be listed the ones that are going on to preliminary proposals. And if it's something that you think, you might be interested in, you could possibly call contact the PI and see if you could, get on that grant, because that is encouraged to add as you go along.
Thank you for mentioning that, Shelly, because you're right. Although one-pagers would do about a week or so ago, that's only the initial process, right? You can still join teams or reconfigure teams, at least one or two more steps down the road. So Naomi, earlier on, you asked about NSF career. Could you please elaborate on that as well right now?
Yes, I'm gonna get rid of my background, although I'm I'm just on one of my rooms, and that I found most suitable, so it's not that pretty. But I was just saying earlier, excuse me, that I contacted my network of people, and they provided me with proposals, and I said proposals, and one of the advices was to get from my Office of Research graphic designer, because look at the difference between these timelines. So I think it has an impact, and the way you present the information, etc. So that was my question. Do we have that type of support in the college?
As far as I know, we don't have an expert in graphic design. I know that I think TEAS provides a graphics expert, and other universities do. So I think that's something that we could explore in terms of getting somebody on board, or at least finding a service that we can, utilize. What do you think, Jeff?
That's a great point. I know we're initiating the process of doing a search for a scientific writer position in our office. So, with that position, maybe we can look for someone who can assist with some of that scientific writing, as well as the graphic presentation of information, right? And I see Anne has a comment. Do you want to speak to that, Anne, as well?
Well, that was just a direct message to you, but I know that our office previously had a research development officer who's now moved on to bigger and better things, but he used to offer that service to a lot of researchers in the college, but it was never an official part of our department. It was just a skill set that he had. So, but just like you said, if we sort of add that as one of the skills that we're looking for in an upcoming hire.
And I'd like to ask our guest panelists, especially those who have included different graphics to convey information, what tips or advice you might share with others in terms of how to present data or information in your grant proposals that you have found successful and helpful for your successful funding. Anyone, or have most people mostly done? Sure. Go ahead.
Because I thought about, and I guess it will be personal to our Office of Communications. Don't they have this skill set as part of their hiring? I know they wouldn't be in the obligation, but I'm just asking.
We have an Office of Communications, but their focus is communicating information from the college at large. So not necessarily working with individual PIs on grant proposals and such.
Oh, okay.
And Naomi, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really important feedback for us to think about, and whether we have that capacity to incorporate that as something that we can offer as a support to our PIs. That sounds important. So, we'll definitely keep that in mind.
Thank you.
So Karen, I want to ask you, in the introduction, you mentioned you have a very diverse portfolio in terms of your external funding. Is that something that you kind of intentionally did, or was it very organic, or what was your process in terms of finding all those different sources of funding?
I think it kind of goes back to the interdisciplinary nature of my work, because I work with a lot of different people in a lot of different colleges. And so there are some aspects of my work that are more attractive to NSF. There are other aspects that are more attractive to the Department of Ed. There are other, if I partner with newer faculty in particular, we usually are looking towards foundations or sort of that we need to go out and collect pilot data. So it's the smaller seed grants. So for me, it's a function of my partnerships as to what type of funding I'm going after.
Thank you. So that's really helpful. So in a way, that's you can think of it strategically, right? You're saying what mechanism might be most suitable or a best match for this type of work or that type of work based on your collaborations. Any other panelists want to share their process in terms of securing or finding mechanisms that you've had success at? Like, how did you find your mechanisms? Sandra, I see you thinking about it, so I know you're getting ready to talk.
No, well, I don't know. I mean, I agree with what Dr. Rambo-Hernandez and Dr. Mendoza and Jim have said, that relationships are really important because you can't put your eyes on everything. Pivot has been great. Usually they send out I get the notice on Sundays. So right now we pursued a seed grant with that same grant proposal. Then we're trying to adapt a few things for an OELA grant. So I guess the thing that I'm saying is that this is just a continual process, and that having a team in place, teams that actually work in the same area that you do, interdisciplinary teams, this has been very helpful about the X grants, because as you're talking about this, I'm thinking, okay, we need to think about submitting one. And so that would be the only thing that I would add is failure is not bad at all in these grants. It just gives you, I mean, we don't like for not to be funded, but certainly it gives us a chance to focus on, and this is what I've heard over and over again, focus on our proposal and then resubmit it. And just an example is that for a teaching grant, which I really absolutely thought we were not going to get this year, we had submitted it last year. We changed a couple of things and it was funded. And this was an interdisciplinary grant with health. So I'm just basically repeating what everybody else has said. This has been as an informational, I really thank you very much, because I think even as panelists we share, but it's also been good information for us.
So Sandra, you bring up a good point about the, grant finding and grant applying process, which is sometimes the resubmission process. So among the guest panelists, any advice in terms of if one of us do get a rejection from that submission, how do you move forward from there? And do you go back to the same mechanism, or do you submit to a different mechanism, or Can anyone share any advice or strategies in terms of resubmissions? Jim?
Yeah, I work with resubmissions a lot, and probably the most important information you can get about your resubmission is the feedback that you get from your reviewers' comments first, and then co-first, equally important, is the information, the feedback that you get from your program officer. A lot of folks, most folks these days, in my opinion, as opposed to many years ago, will reach out to a program officer to get guidance on their proposal before they submit it. But most program officers will tell you, in my experience, says that calling your program officer after you get your program, your review comments back is even more important and can be much more helpful. Because your program officer can't help you write your proposal, but they can definitely tell you what was wrong with it after you submit it and why it wasn't funded, and maybe give you some background and some context of what happened during the actual review process. And program officers are not shy about telling you that, we loved your proposal, we just don't fund that. So you should probably submit it next time over in this other program, or these are things you need to really focus on and when you want to resubmit your proposal if you want it to be more competitive. So one of those two things they're going to tell you. But focus on those review comments. You'll get somebody, if you don't have a lot of experience with review comments, my advice to you is to take them, put them in a drawer and forget about them for at least a week. And then pull them out of the drawer after the week when you're not quite super disappointed anymore, and then read them and go through them. And if there's anything in there you don't understand, talk about them with a colleague, talk about them with me, that's fine. I've read an awful lot of review comments. And also talk about them with your program officer, because it'll give you a lot of confidence and a lot of really critical information that you need to incorporate into a resubmitted proposal. I mean, there really is no such thing in NSF as a resubmission. They're all new proposals. But NIH is the same way. Your program officer is your fount of information, and that kind of after review conversation with your program officer is incredibly important. I have one faculty that I've worked with for a lot of years, even when he is funded. He still has that after the review comment conversation to find out how he can make his next proposal even better. Yeah. So that's what a lot of people don't do, and I've really been encouraging folks to do that. The few that have taken me up on that say, yeah, you're so right. The information I got in that conversation after my review, I completely understand my comments now. I know which ones are important to incorporate and which ones I can ignore, and exactly what to do to be more successful, more competitive.
Great, thank you, Jim. That's really excellent advice and really helpful. Noemi?
I'd say it's kind of on the same lines that Jim's talking about, but the only thing I would add is, yes, that relationship with the officer is crucial. Otherwise, you don't have the whole picture. So I only have my latest with the RFE, the Professional Formation of Engineers. Was originally rejected. I honestly didn't do a very good job on my first. I knew to a certain extent it was going to be rejected. I didn't have enough time to prepare that proposal well. But with the information, actually, I kind of did it like, okay, I'm just going to send it to see what is it that I can improve on this, because that should never be done. But so when I talked to the officer, she was able to tell me exactly where I should be really paying a lot of attention, and I got it the next time. But I also wanted to ask, because there are certain agencies and funding opportunities that are very open to for this type of relationships. There are others that are not, to be quite frank. Now that I moved to the College of Education, I find that because I've tried to, pretty much my development has been become a reviewer, connect with people, connect with officers, and then you're ready for big submissions. That I don't see happening in other instances. For instance, I applied for an NX3 grant the first time they came out. I was just looking for, like, it was declined. I was just looking for a review process, a reviewer panel, something. And I'm still at loss. That's why I wrote on the chat. Can I get more information about X grants? Who's doing it? Who's the officer? What are the criteria for rejection? Can I have a review? A review comment to address? Can I talk to somebody? Can I be in a panel? Et cetera, et cetera. So that was answer and question.
Karen, yeah, you want to share some advice on
I
this?
just have a really quick thing about resubmissions is that grants are not the same as a journal article. With journal articles, you can only have it under review in one place. But with grants, you don't have that same limitation. And so you can seek funding from multiple sources for the same idea. And then, man, if they both get funded, that's amazing. And you've got a great problem on your hands and you can figure out what funding you're going to take. But there may be some stipulations in some specific instances, but in my experience, you can have the same idea under review at a couple of places. I know I have one grant that we've submitted to NSF and it's under review again as another revision, but we met this week about, okay, where else are we going to go try to fund this idea because we're not getting a lot of success at NSF. So let's go look at other places to try to fund that same idea.
Thank you, Karen. That's really great advice because as faculty, a lot of people have that mindset of, we're always publishing, so you only can have it sitting under review at one place. But you're right. As long as you're at NSF, they say current and pending, right? As long as you disclose that, it's really not a problem. So that's really important information. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I'm going to ask all guest panelists to provide a closing comment or, final advice or thoughts you want to share with the group. Start off with Noemi.
I guess the keyword is perseverance. And do something about your networks and the connection to people. At the end of the day, I think it's led, organized, done by people. So the more you connect with people, I think the more, at least the more I've been successful when it comes to grants. And I mean people, PIs, Office of Diversity, Office of Research, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Sandra. Oh, your microphone.
Yeah, no, it doesn't want to cooperate. I would say the same thing, just tagging onto that perseverance, looking at the second time we submitted a proposal, look at it again, and you can tweak it. And sometimes just changing the title and changing a few things, the focus is very helpful in relationships.
Thank you. Karen?
I would just add that what you see on somebody's CV is only what's been funded. And that's the tip of the iceberg. You've got to ask for money if you're going to get money. So you've got to be putting yourself out there, be willing to take those rejections and roll with them, because eventually you're going to have some hit, but you have not because you ask not, so to speak.
I love that. Thank you for that advice. That's the bottom line, right? If you don't ask, you don't get the money. Love that. Jim?
Yeah, for sure. My experience with proposals is the only way to get good at writing proposals is to write proposals, get feedback, learn from the process, and repeat. And those people that are persistent and realize that the peer review of proposals is an entirely subjective process, and the results you receive are completely not personal. It's just the way it goes. You're gonna be successful sometimes. You're gonna be unsuccessful sometimes. That's just the nature of the process. But I've never worked with a faculty member who didn't give up and didn't get funded. So if you don't give up and you keep trying to learn and you bring all the resources to bear that you can, whether it's the CERD office or the Division of Research office or any of the many offices that we have here in the university, have as many people give you feedback as possible, that process will get you funded as quickly as you possibly can get funded, and will keep you funded over time.
Great, thank you, Jim. You're right. We have a lot of offices and support and resources here at A&M. We're all here to support our PIs, help them become successful or remain successful. And, we're here for all of you. So thank you, Jim. Shelly?
Okay, yeah, I just, I didn't get all of Dr. Mendoza's questions about the X grant when she spoke last, but, so I'd be glad to talk with you more about that. But what I was gonna say was, if you want to know how reviewers think, get on a review panel. So in a way to do that, X grants, we're always looking for reviewers, especially at the early stages. So always, volunteer for that and see how reviewers think when they're going through the process.
Thank you, Shelly. Yeah, definitely. Being a reviewer, you see it on the other side. You learn new insights about the process, so that's really helpful. And Julie?
Yes, well, I have two things. One, I think long-term, establish a research agenda at the beginning of your career and think of these these projects as steps along the way. So always look long-term to your main goal for 5, 10, 15 years from now. Don't be afraid to just go out there and browse funding opportunities that might be of interest to you, even though you're not ready to apply for them right now, and see how those might, how you might position yourself to apply for them in the future. So get some of those little seed grants and get preliminary data. So think long-term, always have an eye on what's out there. The second thing is about relationships. I can't stress those enough. It takes a while, and I'm talking in terms of collaborations. It takes a while. It could take up to a couple of years to establish a really trustful, is that a word? Trusting relationship with potential collaborators, to where you can really work together and trust each other enough to share the information that you'll need to establish a successful collaboration. So try to reach out and make those connections early, and eventually you'll have a really good network of potential collaborators and colleagues that can help you out. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, Julie. So I want to end by thanking everyone, all our guest panelists, as well as our participants. Really appreciate all of your time and participation. Really enjoyed our conversation and learned a lot from everyone today. So really appreciate all of you. And I hope everyone will have a good rest of your afternoon. All right, see y'all next time. Have a good day.